welcome to Musicians Roundtable. I'm Jeffrey Goodman. Today our guest is Mason Williams. Mason is the composer of the iconic guitar instrumental piece, Classical Gas, and today we're going to discuss that piece as well as his memories and reflections upon his early life in music. So welcome, Mason. How are you?
Good, doing well. Nice to see you again. I really enjoyed working with you before with Barbosa Lima. That was quite the interview, and a lot of people saw that for sure.
Absolutely. So are you in Portland today?
In Eugene.
You're in Eugene, of course, yes.
And I'm with my recordist, arranger, guitarist, best friend, Don Latarsky.
That's fantastic. So it's
okay.
It's great to see you both. So what we're going to talk about today is the piece Classical Gas. But before we get into that, I wanted to just see if you could talk about your early connection to music. When did you start playing music? What instruments did you begin to play, and how did that evolve?
Right. Let's see. Okay. I'll go all the way back as far as I can to I was born in Abilene, Texas, and I lived there. And my mother had a sister that was crazy about music, and she would play, well, they were 78s during that time. This was like 44 and 45. And 1944, 1945. And she would play music all day in her bedroom that she had. And she would dance around and sing along with them. And there was a big record player in the living room. And she had put a record on it. And I watched how she turned the record player on and then put the needle on the record. And the song was Amour. And the song was like this: Amour, amour, amour. These words so sweet that I repeat mean I adore you. Amour, amour, amour. Can you deny this heart that I have laid before you? And so I played that over and over and over. And the most interesting thing that happened was I kind of went into a trance. It's almost like swooning, listening to the music. And I remember at that very time thinking, man, this music is powerful stuff to sort of take you into a dream state. And so anyway, and I kind of grew up listening to a lot of country music. You know, it was all the Hanks, Hank Snow, Hank Thompson, Hank Williams. And so a lot of country music, Eddie Arnold, all those great country stars. And some of the songs I remember was Cow Cow Boogie. That was really a great tune. You can probably look up anything on the internet these days, but that's one I remember. And of course, I liked all of the cartoony songs like the Woody Woodpecker song. How much da 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 da. That's the Woody Woodpecker song, and that was out of a cartoon or something like. So you always like the novelty tunes a lot, and so I was listening to her records and the radio as well, and I moved to a little town called Rural, Texas, and which is sort of sort of north, a little bit northeast of Abilene, and I used to listen to the radio there a lot, and there was a lot of great music on the radio. let's see, gosh, I can't remember this guy. He was a tenor and really one of the greatest singers of all time. Oh, so anyway, there's a Star Spangled Banner waving somewhere. I can't remember who the singer was, but he was really something. And so you started to have favorites, and there was Ernest Tubb, and there was the Smoke on the Water. There were a lot of World War II references to songs and whatnot. And I would sit and listen to these, and sometimes remember them and just sing them to myself. And then in 1947, I moved from little town of Rural to Oklahoma City, and with my father and my stepmother, Alice. My father's name was Jack or Jackson. Her name was Alice, and they lived in Oklahoma City, and didn't have a radio, but she had a little small radio that was a battery operated radio. And we especially like to listen to the Grand Old Opry. And we would lay in a circle on the living room rug with this radio between us and listen to the Grand Old Opry. And it was all those great stores, you know, Lonzo and Oscar and Minnie Pearl. And I actually got to work with Minnie Pearl once. That was a thrill. And all of those great Grand Ole Opry stars. And I actually got to play the Grand Ole Opry once to Johnny Cash. That was a big deal. So anyway, I would say that country music was the initial background of my interests. And so and in let's see, this would have been around 19, gosh, I'm trying to remember, 1946, something like that. I moved to Oregon City, and I would listen to a lot of songs there on the radio. And so I was always glued to the radio listening to music. And then in 1947, I moved to Oklahoma City, like I said, and that was listening to on the floor with that radio. And then I moved back to Oregon after that. And my stepfather was a logging truck driver, and he had to get up quite early. It was called hoodelling, where they had to get up and get in the woods before it got too hot. And so I would stay up late and turn on the radio and actually put my ear to the radio so it wouldn't wake them up. And so I was listening. It wasn't loud at all, just barely on. And I would listen to all of those radio shows from LA that were playing the pop hits. So that was kind of my first exposure to pop music. And in high school and junior high school, I was in love with the Platters and the Drifters. And I still sing in my falsetto, I still sing a lot of their songs. Oh, yes, I'm the great pretender, pretending that I'm doing well. My need is such, I pretend too much. I'm lonely, I'm wearing my heart like a crown, pretending that you're still around. And the great thing about the falsetto is you can hold a note for still around. No, I got off key there, but you can hold a note for pretending that you're still around, still around. So now you can even hold it longer than that if necessary. Voice is a little crackly, but I still love to sing in my falsetto. And Don and I have recorded some, oh, I did Only You can make this world seem right. And my prayer and the answer you give. So had a great time going back to sing all those songs I fell in love with in junior high school and high school. I also used to sing. I developed my falsetto because whatever was a hit, I sang along with it. And if it was a woman's hit by a female singer, I just sing them off falsetto along with her. So it didn't really matter who it was. Let's see. I had a quartet in high school. There was 4 of us who were called, let's see, the Imperials, something like that. And it was 3 guys and a girl, and we sang, all those they were called race records back then. That was Work With Me, Henry, and Cherry Pie, and all of those the great black songs from the 50s. And about that same time, Elvis came along. That was a big deal. And let's see, what was it? Trying to think of. I can't think of the name of it, but it's called Sometimer's Disease. Sometimes you remember it, sometimes you don't. So anyway, we sang a lot of music in that group in high school. And I was in the choir, and I couldn't exactly read music, but I would sit next to somebody who could and look at the music and because of my high voice, I usually got to sing along with the sopranos, who usually got the melody. So that made it easy. And but it was the choir was a big part of my high school education. And let's see, I'm trying to think of. I went into in 1956. I started working in a record shop. This was my first year in college at Oklahoma City University, and I worked in this record shop from like 3 to 9, 5 or 6 hours. And one of the things I did, I thought was really interesting, was I listened to every record in the store. I just started at there were these LPs on all these racks, a lot of 45s too. So I listened to every record in the store. And I had a music teacher, and I told him that, and he said, "Well, that's really interesting. Why don't you go back and listen to the ones you didn't like again?" And so I went back, and I started to really sort of develop an interest in the classical music, the dissonances, and at one point I was getting these miniature scores of Beethoven, because you'd hear something and you'd go, "What the hell was that?" And so you would get the score and look up. And one time I remember I couldn't figure out what the sound was, and it was a French horn and a bassoon together. That was an interesting sound. So anyway, I'm getting a big music education from working in this record store. And I bought a guitar for $13 from a friend of mine, and I even wrote a song about it called $13 Stella. So anyway, I bought this guitar from this guy who needed some money, and it was a Stella, and it had a big metal plate on the end of it. So I don't know how old that was, but it was quite old. I still have that guitar. And it had a sort of it wasn't exactly ivory, but it was some kind of plastic, white plastic keyboard on it. And this this guy named Bill Cheatwood came into. He just came in. Came into the store, and he played guitar, and he played flamenco and classical and things like that. And so he's the one that got me interested in fingerstyle playing, and taught me, that you do the thumb is on the bottom 3 strings and your fingers are on the other 3. And he's the one that showed me how to make chords, and how to have the good position. I've always been told that you want about 2 fingers between your hand and the neck of the guitar, so you're not grabbing it. It depends on, there are people that make chords with their thumbs over the neck too. That's okay. Whatever you want to do is okay. And you have to sit up right. That's really important. You don't want to, posture is a big part of playing well. And he showed me that it's good to have a footstool to put your your guitar on. And so anyway, I learned, and he's the one that transformed the guitar from being the metal thing on the bottom of it. He took it to somebody who turned it into a real guitar with the strings, what do you call them? The pegs,
pins,
huh?
The pins,
yeah, for the strings. And so I began to put classical nylon strings on the guitar, and that was a lot easier to play, of course. And so I would say that he was the primary resource I had for learning to play guitar. And also his father was a collector of folk music, and he had this vast collection of folk song books. And Bill and I ended up rooming together at Oklahoma City University. And once I had learned to read music, I would get some of these books like the Folk Songs of North America. And because I was learning to read music, I learned every song in that book. I mean, not as part of a repertoire, but learned it well enough to play through it one time. And I think that's where I got the idea for those melodies were so great that I think that classical gas really is a modal folk music more than any. I mean, not that it doesn't have classical structures in it, but musically, I think of it as being modal. And and he had a vast record collection too. And we would put, then you had those record players where you could put a stack of records on and would play a dozen records all night. And we would listen to music all night long. And he had Ravi Shankar records and real obscure banjo players, and because of his father's interest in folk music, and Theodore Bickel, and there were also all of those sort of naughty records during that time, they were called. There was Lenny Bruce, listening to those. And there was records called party records that people would order, and I would carefully put them on and listen to them. And Red Fox and one guy named Dootsy Williams, and they were all these black funny jokes and humor and whatnot and funny songs. So I got quite the education out of this record shop and my friend Bill Cheatwood. And One of the first gigs I did was I was asked by someone to write some music for the Overland Stage Company, and the people that someone in town had an overland stage, and somebody had written a bunch of songs about the overland stage, and we recorded these songs. And I sang, and Bill played guitar on it, and so that was my first first time to learn other songs and record them.
So I was going to ask you then, when did you begin to compose either songs or any instrumental things?
Let's see. I guess the first thing is that the Kingston Trio was happening about this time, so I began to learn all of these folk songs, not only them, but all these other obscure people as well. And I've got a list of all them somewhere, but there's also the Naughty Songs, Oscar Brand, and others. And so I was getting quite the music education. And the first song I wrote was, they had a contest in Oklahoma City, a songwriting contest. And so I wrote a song called She's So Fine. And I sang it on stage at this theater, and I actually won the contest with that song, and I paid off my bills with it. $100 was a lot of money in 1958 and 9. So I paid off my bills, and that was my first song. And so I didn't bring my info about I had I was singing at this coffee house called the Gourd in Oklahoma City, and it later became the Budai. And Steve Brainerd was his club, and I formed this trio called the Wayfarers, and it was Bill Cheatwood and Baxter Taylor and myself. And so we worked up these folk songs, and it was, Follow the Drinking Gourd, and When I First Came to This Land. And so all of these folk songs that we kind of fell in love with, and going down this road feeling bad. And it was really great to have, and some Jewish songs that we Havana Gala. And so it's great to sing and learn songs in foreign languages. And so anyway, we had this Wayfarers trio, and we sang locally and never really went anywhere except maybe down to Texas a couple of times to play gigs. And but we were primarily in Oklahoma City because I was in school, and we sang for dinner parties, and we sang for church socials, and just all kinds of little places that were there. Word got around that we were available for these sort of local events.
So then if we're going to speak about classical gas, can you discuss how classical gas started with your playing? I think I remember you telling me that it was somehow during the time in which you were affiliated as a writer of the Smothers Brothers TV show.
Yes.
So how did classical gas begin in your composition aspect?
Let's see. Well, because of a lot of the Smothers Brothers comedy routines are based on folk music. and I'd learned about 300 folk songs. So I was a pretty good resource for them to do, their comedy routines. And basically, so I would show them a song I knew, and we used to call it opening it up. In other words, I would arrange the song for them, or it couldn't be too complicated, but I would arrange the song for them, and then I would come up with some funny things for Tommy to get involved in the middle of it, and they recorded about 20 or 30 of my songs on their albums and on the show as well. And what I would do for them is I would create an intro and then a middle transition and then an ending, and then they would improvise in between those things. So that was the idea, is that you gave them a place to start and a place to get to in the middle, and then a place to the end. And Tommy was a very good guitarist. He really knew what he was doing, and played with a big felt pick. And I tried to learn to play with a pick, but I was never very good at it. I didn't do the rest stroke thing like the real great players do. And but I played well. It was great to have it on the 12 string and things like that. And when I was playing my bluegrass friends, it was great to be able to play on my six string Martin that I had.
What was the birth process of classical gas?
Okay. We had been in Las Vegas, and I was playing guitar and banjo and recorder for the Smothers Brothers. And we came back, it was during the summer, and we came back, and I had been listening to a lot of classical, a lot of guitar music, Sandy Bull and Silvio Santisteban. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. Baden Powell.
Oh, yes.
Let's see. Who's the guy that played in the octaves?
Wes Montgomery.
Yeah, Montgomery, and all kinds of guitarists. And so I was inspired to write something. And I must say, I was more interested in instrumental music than I was in writing songs. I did write a lot of songs, but in fact, those were the first things I wrote. But I wrote my first instrumental music, $13 Stella, in 1961, something like that. And I went into the Navy for 2 years. So the great thing about the Navy was you're on watch all night, and you're just sitting there by yourself. So I take my guitar and just play guitar all night on watch. And you had to get up once in a while and walk around and make sure everything was okay. But other than that, it was just hanging out with you and my guitar. I did write a lot of songs about the Navy, and I kind of got that from Woody Guthrie about, you want to write songs about the people you know and where you are and what's going on in your life. So I wrote about a dozen songs about my ship. And Woody Guthrie, would sort of borrow from folk melodies. And I wrote a song about my ship called the Good Ship Paul Revere, and it was based on there was a lofty ship, and she sailed upon the sea, and the name of the ship was the Golden Vanity, and she thought she might be something by the Turkish Reverie, as she sailed upon the lowland low, as she sailed upon the lowland sea. So that is such a great melody. And I had all of these sea shanties that I learned as a folk singer, and I started singing sea shanties in the folk clubs in San Diego, and the Navy. An article somewhere about me. What happened was a helicopter crashed just a little distance from our ship, and we rescued the pilots of the helicopter, and I wrote a song about it, and it got on the front page of the newspaper, and the Navy liked the idea of having the press, so that kind of got me involved in writing these songs, those Navy songs that I wrote, and gosh, I'd have to dig up a list of those for you. But once again, it was just sort of adapting folk songs into my own songs. Okay.
So
anyway, I got real sidetracked there, but going back to classical gas. So I was listening to all this music, and I just sat down. I used to keep a guitar by the fireplace, and I just sat down at the fireplace one day and started playing around with a melody, and ended up working out the first part of the tune. And the guy who did the routining, it was called, on the Smothers Brothers show, in other words, worked up the arrangements for Tom and Dick or for Nelson Riddle, no kidding, to orchestrate. I did a recording session, and I played the tune, and he helped me write it down, and I didn't realize that it was as complicated as it was. And so he said, "Boy, this is all over the place," but he was able to write it down, in the different not key signatures, but what do you call them? Meters, yeah. And so I did a little recording of it, and I would say that I was, after studying music at Oklahoma City University, you had learned all of these compositional techniques from them. Classical gas is basically sonata form, which is an exposition, a development, and a recapitulation, which is what it does. And also the idea that the intro was a statement of themes you were going to develop in tempo later on. And so you would have to go into the composition if you wanted to talk about the different sections of it.
So in the opening slow intro, one of the things I notice is, and as a classical guitarist, is this very amazing constant variation technique where you have the opening idea, and then instead of what many people would do, which would be to repeat it exactly, you start it, but then there's an elaboration, there's ornamentation of notes and other gestures. And that's something that keeps the music always interesting to listen to. Always there's this forward motion that's created not by accident and by just block repetitions, but by a constant variation. And that variation takes place at many different levels. One of them is in the main theme right after the slow intro, is you have basically the first bar of A minor, and then you have, and that's in 4/4 time, and then you stay in 4/4 time, but then you have this wonderful complicated meter, which is, I call it 3 + 3 + 2 8, which is a group of three, and then 2. So the total number of eighth notes is 8 eighth notes, so it's in 4/4 time.
Right.
But it creates a kind of feeling of syncopation, and then you go back to the more traditional accent pattern of the
Right.
4/4 time. So I
Right.
was wondering, um, how how did you come up with some of these kinds of ways of keeping that music so interesting, both as a for a player and also certainly for people who are listening?
Um, and I would say that the guitar is such a great arranger that it is constantly suggesting to you things to try. And the part that's in C, that yeah, da 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 da, that part is. Uh, See, the thing about an intro is you're presenting ideas that you're going to develop later in the piece, and so the da 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 ya da da da, uh, that starts the piece. And the other thing that I remember from studying music in Oklahoma City University was that a lot of the compositions would start with a small group and then repeat this music again, but add more instruments. And that's where the orchestra basically came in, and the harmony. And also the thing the thing that I thought was moved the song along was I would go da yeah da 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 da, so I'd anticipate the note da 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 da, and that sort of gave it an urgency. And even later on, it's da 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 da. So you're always anticipating the next chord or pattern with an eighth note. And all throughout the piece, I've done that. And let's see, the da 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 that Mike Post wrote that for the brass. And because I always said, oh, if someone's going to arrange it for me, and then I should give them a little place to add something to it. And even Chet Atkins added a classical little piece into it of his own. And and then it then it went into a section called pedal point over the A minor. Diddle dee da diddle da 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 diddle dee da diddle da, and that's that same pattern again. And then it went to the section in C major, which is the relative major of A minor. And then after that pattern, one of the techniques I learned in music school was that you could play the same notes, either same notes, but faster or slower. Diminution is to make the notes patterns slower, or augmentation is to make them longer. You were learning all of these things in music school, and the augmentation was that it's the same pattern that was in the first part of the tune, but it's instead of dotted quarters, it's quarter notes, so that's faster. And then when you got up to the bridge in D major, and I always thought that D major was a really great key to add to an A minor composition. And so I used that same, I used that same pattern in that section as well when it went to the G, C, F, B flat.
There are some sections where you have a circle of fifths that lead you into a section that's in A minor, and then that A minor section then moves into the D major section.
Uh-huh.
Circle of fifths is something that you really don't see that in popular music.
No, yeah.
And the other thing another aspect that I find endlessly beautiful and fascinating to experience as I play it and teach the piece is the transitional measures. So often in popular music, you have block sections with no transition, really. You just
Right.
begin immediately to that. But there are, throughout the composition, there are just very beautiful, elegant transitional measures that really lead into the next section in a way
Right.
that's so compelling.
See what I was going to, in other words, I'm on I think of it as being A minor, and I'm going up like a tenth, or actually I'm going up in an octave and a sixth. So I'm going from, I think of it as being A minor, and then I'm going up to the A minor on top up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, you could just jump up there, or why not have something that was a melodic transition up to that? And that's it. Yeah, da 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 da. So that was the idea of having a melodic transition that went up to the bridge.
Yes, and that's something that I think it becomes, these elements are things that just are part of the intrinsic charismatic character of what you've composed here. And that I think that so, of course, so many people have enjoyed this. I am struck sometimes when I go to a score version of great masterpieces that get into the popular experience for people, how much absolutely rigorous composer's intelligence has been used in the creation of the composition. That's something that classical gas has in such abundance.
All right.
One thing I was just curious about is, so the title classical gas, that's how did that title come?
Oh, I actually wrote it as, it was called classical gasoline, and I thought of it as fuel for the classical guitar. But when I recorded it, the copyist didn't want to write out gasoline on every part, so he's the one that wrote classical gas. So I'd have to thank the copyist for that great title. A lot of people thought that I meant that, hey man, it's a gas. It was like during the sort of the hippie jazz era, where he's a, hey man, that is a gas, and so a lot of people thought that's what it meant, but it was actually classical gasoline shortened to classical gas. So I lucked out on that one.
Oh, there were a lot of things that came together for so beautifully for people. So
one of the things I'm always amazed at is how different guitarists will play sections of it in other places on the guitar I would never have thought of. Tommy Emmanuel, for example, is all over the guitar playing it, and a guitarist can bring all of their knowledge and skills to the piece and explore it that way. And I've had people start the whole recording. I've seen some people start on the bridge, for example, and then go into the tune. And I've got about 400 recordings of it, everything from bagpipes to piano to harp to you name it. So and I think that all these different people see it as about their instrument as well as the guitar.
Yeah, it has all of these different ways that people connect to it. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today to discuss this. We've just touched upon the surface of so many things, but I will look forward to hopefully some further conversations down the road about some of your other compositional techniques and pieces.
All
And
right.
so again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure to speak with you.
Okay. Well, we'll talk again. You were interested in my song Sunflower. So
Absolutely.
we'll touch on that next time. Okay, look forward to it.
Wonderful. Thanks
Hey,
so
I'll give
much.
you here's I saw this salute on TV. It was a 1927 movie with Gary Cooper, and he went like this. He went. So he did a salute and then the V sign, which I thought that was pretty hip. So anyway.
Totally cool. That's good. Thanks.
Okay. All
Lots of-
right.